It's kind of inspired by you, Dr. G. So I got my Christmas hat on, and I just had a sip of coffee. I'm going to get this thing started. So let me get serious for a second. All right. So critical assignment for Kin 552. This is Roger Richard from Cal Baptist University. And here we go. So the population that I chose was high school softball athletes. That population consists of female softball players from the ages of here it says 14 to 18, but actually you may get some 13-year-olds, you may even get some 19-year-olds depending on when they start school. Some girls starting school a little earlier, some girls starting school later. We have a bigger group of what we call holdbacks. We have girls that repeat the 8th grade, so they can be a little bit older, going into high school, so they're a little more competitive. They're full-time students as well as full-time athletes, and probably more than full-time athletes. Most female sports, and especially softball, tend to be highly specialized. These girls start playing when they're about 8 or 9, and maybe even younger, playing in rec leagues and city leagues and things like that. But by the time they get to the 10-year-old and up age limit, it starts to be highly competitive, and it doesn't leave much time for other sports. The girls will play year-round. It's not until they get to high school till they actually get some off time. They'll have a month, probably late summer, after our tournament season, where they have time off. They'll have a few weeks around this time of year for holidays, time off, where they aren't playing games. That time off isn't real time off because they'll still have hitting lessons. They'll still have fielding lessons. If they're a pitcher, they'll still have pitching lessons. So they don't really get that time off. On top of that, the more competitive girls and more competitive organizations participate in some type of conditioning year-round, whether it be with a training facility or they go out to practices and they do some conditioning at their practices. The practices, if it's not tournament season, if they're not playing games, they'll have a 5 or 6 hour practice on a Saturday and then come back on a Sunday for another couple hours. And granted, they're not getting the girls every day, Monday through Friday, so they're trying to get all the practice time in on the weekend. But 7 hours of practice can be extremely taxing for those girls that are in the age range where, the high school age girls, where they are in the age range where they're going to be working out. They'll be doing some type of strength conditioning with their high school, if they're lucky. And then if they aren't, then most of the higher functioning girls, their parents have set them up with something training wise, whether it be through their organization, training with someone or some organization, or on their own, they'll have personal trainers or things like that. So the girls' time is very limited. They got schoolwork that they have to do. They have homeworks. They have to keep good grades in order to continue to be athletes. So it's very, very highly specialized. They aren't really having the opportunity to go and play other sports because in Southern California the weather's great year round. So you don't get very many girls that get to branch off and do other things to kind of, alleviate themselves from the stresses of softball. They don't have really a reprieve other than that time off. Like I said, in the late summer and late in the year around now, where they get, Christmas break, but then they have school finals or school starting up or things like that. So, very taxing physically and mentally, for these athletes. So I talked a little bit about early sports specialization. According to Blagrove, Ruenvels, and Reed, adolescents should avoid intense training for a single sport, for more than 8 months out of the year. And they're definitely there. Like I said, they're probably getting at least 10 to 11 months out of the year. And their weekly volume is pretty close to exceeding their age. Like I said, they've got 7 hours on a weekend for practices. They got a fielding lesson at least once a week, which is an hour. They got hitting lessons maybe twice a week, depending on the athlete. They got a pitching lesson if they're a pitcher. They're also going to be, like I said, doing some type of strength conditioning. Most high school softball teams will be doing some conditioning pretty much year round. And then outside of that, they're going to outside sources to train, a couple times a week, if not more. So you see most girls are doing, probably 20 hours or so of activity, that's related to softball specifically. And again, according to the same study, young athletes are encouraged to participate in a diverse range of sports and physical activities during childhood. And I completely agree. I think for younger athletes, being able to get out and try different things actually makes them better at whatever sport they end up sticking with. I think having the opportunity to get a little more diverse movements, a little more diversity in terms of the people they're coached by or coached with. Softball coaches are all different, but they all kind of work towards the same thing. So they have lots of similarities. So they only get cues from a certain type of coach. It's for certain types of movements. You'll find that softball players and even baseball players, they're kind of trick athletes. They're really good at one or two things, but you ask them to do two things at once and they kind of struggle, because they specialize so much in doing these really, really specific unilateral one-sided movements. And so when you ask them to combine two things, they tend to struggle with it. Dealing with high school girls, you have to think about the female athlete triad, and this is something that's important. No matter what age the girls are, but high school and up definitely. And it consists of three interrelated components: their energy availability, their ability, like how much food they're taking in versus how much activity they're doing. Girls tend to struggle because they have a lot of social body image things going on, as well as being athletes, and so they have to balance eating to perform and eating to look a certain way. So they tend to make poor health choices in terms of eating, because they want to look a certain way. It doesn't help them as an athlete. It doesn't help them just in their overall health. It also affects their menstrual cycle, especially for young girls getting into it. Starving themselves or having possible eating disorders, throws off that menstrual cycle function and kind of helps to set them back. Also the bone mineral density, and that's something that, they're gonna get because of the amount of activity that they're doing. They're gonna add to their bones because they're lifting weights and they're running and they're adding all that stress. But because they're not eating properly, they're having problems with fragile bones and just start to get injured. And according to the same study, Blagrove, Bruinvels, and Reed, early sports specialization has been identified as an independent risk factor of the female triad, because they have so many occurrences of the same thing. They tend to set themselves up for specific injuries due to the sport, or because of a certain way they need to be for that particular sport. For example, if it was dance or some type of swimming sport where they need to be thinner, that would affect the way that they eat. Even though they're performing 20 hours or so of work per week, they're eating for somebody that may be doing 5 hours of work per week or none at all, because they're learning to look a certain way. So that causes mental health issues and eventually burnout, and girls get burned out and they don't want to continue the sport anymore. Some of the psychological factors, like I mentioned, mental health, stress, right? Stress reflects a sense of immediate danger or physiological response related to a confrontation or escape. Physical stress is something that's obvious in terms of being an athlete. There's going to be lots of physical stress. You're going to be working hard, forcing yourself to do things that are uncomfortable. And like they said, that saying of get comfortable being uncomfortable. And that's the life of an athlete. So the physical stress from games, from practices, they accumulate over time and begin to kind of break down and wear on the body, and the mind of the athletes, the mental and emotional states of the athletes, because their practices are so hard or because they don't get any free time, that stuff starts to wear on them. So some of the strategies to overcome, and I'll come back to this later: relaxation, deep breathing and meditation, having a plan, and just flat out being prepared. Anxiety is another issue. They have feelings of worry about something that may happen. It may just be their personality. They may just kind of always be anxious about things that are going to happen. It may just be based on a situation. Let's say we're in the seventh inning of a tie ball game and you're up to bat against a pitcher who's been lights out all day. It's tied up. If you get this hit, we go ahead. If we don't, you're the reason we lost. And so that anxious moment, as they walk up to the plate, can really hang on them. And then if that situation doesn't go the way that they want it, that lingers a little longer. And again, strategies to overcome relaxation is one of the big ones. Distraction, and having a mantra. There's also social factors. They are teenage athletes. They're teenage girls. The teenage years are filled with plenty of social issues that affect young people in general, but women specifically. And being an athlete kind of encourages those things. They have all the responsibilities of a regular student as well as the responsibilities of an athlete. Because they're an athlete, they get less time to spend with the other students because they've got practices and games and all that stuff. So they don't get to hang out the same way. And so they have trouble fitting in or finding friends, because their schedules aren't the same. They don't get to do the same things as the other kids. Being in relationships, they're teenagers. Everybody wants to have a boyfriend or a girlfriend. It's hard to do when you've got 20 hours of extra activity that nobody else has. It's hard to do when you're an athlete, so you can't dress up all the time like everyone else. It's kind of difficult, and that definitely affects their mental state for games and performance. Some of the strategies there are just, to know yourself, know your situation, have a great attitude, right? Again, I'll come back to those, but those are probably some of the bigger things to do in a social situation for female athletes or softball players in general. So distraction. All right, we got a situation that's going on, like in the picture here, where the College World Series, and I've had the privilege of coaching 6 of the girls in the picture. Just kind of distract yourself from the moment, to step away from the moment, do something outside of the game, to kind of get out of it, or outside of that situation. Like you have girls that kind of goof off in the dugout, and that's not to be disrespectful to the game, but they're trying to distract themselves from the moment, right? Have a mantra. Have something that you say every time you go up to the plate, no matter what the situation is, to kind of make that moment the same, no matter how difficult the moment is, no matter how good the pitcher is or how tense the situation is, you address it the same way. Relaxation and deep breathing. Before you step in the box, take a deep breath. Right? Exhale, get yourself to a place where you're not as anxious, you're not as riled up. You can kind of bring your heart rate down a little bit. Always have a plan. I know hitters have a plan when they step into the box. I know, pitchers have a plan when they're going against a particular hitter. But just having a plan in general in life, it definitely helps out. Like knowing what you're going to do each day or what you're going to do in a certain situation allows you to make the right decisions in that situation. And it takes away some of the stress and anxiety of that situation. The next few are dealing more with social situations, just understanding yourself. Like I said, know thyself, having values and a commitment based, strategies. If you value a particular thing more than another, it's easier for you to make the decision to affect that particular thing. So knowing yourself, knowing why you're doing a certain thing, knowing why you're training 4 or 5 hours, on a weekend, know why you have to practice, or know what it is that you actually want, and understand that these things, like your goals or the things that you value, these are the ways to get there. And that definitely helps, in the moment, when you're feeling overwhelmed, to think about why you're doing it. It makes the what a lot easier. Having a great attitude. Like I always tell my athletes, there's 2 things you control. That's your effort and your attitude. As long as you can give great effort and have a great attitude, most things are going to work out in your favor. And if they don't, you can't be too upset about it because you did the 2 things that you can control. And lastly, knowing your situation, knowing, the situation in the sense that if it's a difficult situation, you got to kind of toughen up. If it's not so difficult, you can kind of lay back a little bit. Don't let every situation tell you who you're going to be. You tell your situation who you are. And here's a list of references, just because you asked for them. I want to say that this class was probably one of the better classes that I've had. Not probably, it was the best class that I've had thus far. I've got 3 more. Really appreciated the way that you conducted the classes. I got a couple seconds here. I thank you so much for what you've done. I'm really super interested now in this topic, and I think that I'm going to continue to try to push towards this. Psychology is not something that I thought I would like, but